Welcome to another episode of KFUG's Community Square. I'm Heather Polen, and today we are here with our sheriff, Sheriff Scott. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a nice day, no rain. We're having a good time.
Great. Now it's going to rain. You know how that works.
Yep. I know.
You jinxed us.
That's the way it goes sometimes around Norte County. You never know if it's going to rain, snow, or be a beautiful day, but the ocean was nice and flat this morning, so hopefully it's a good day.
Well, that's a beautiful day in Del Norte County.
That's right.
Right?
That's
if you
right.
live here, it's always a beautiful day.
Oh, yeah. We live in one of the nicest places in the world. I've traveled a lot of places, and it's hard to beat Del Norte County. It really is.
Right. So what would be the second most beautiful place you've ever traveled to?
You know, Jamaica was beautiful, but a different kind of beautiful. You know, the ocean and just the countryside and things like that. I really enjoyed that. But, you know, when you get back to Del Norte County and you see all the greenery and the clean rivers and, you know, the trees, the maple trees is one thing. That's what I really love is the maple trees and the redwoods. It's hard to beat.
It really is.
Yeah.
Gotta love those. So I have a few questions about the Randy Hooper case, if you don't mind.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I've had a lot of questions about that. I'm more than happy to answer.
That's great.
You
So
bet.
my first question is when I called and I spoke with, I think he's the PIO, so the Public Information Officer, there seemed to be a bit of confusion on whether or not Del Norte County has a work release program. Do we have a work release program?
It is confusing because stepping back a few years, there was such short staffing that a lot of those programs, we couldn't do it. We just didn't have the people to do that. And those programs are all in place so that we can do it. What we don't have right now is the old SWAP program where we used to have an inmate crew go out and clean up, you know, the cemetery and places like that. And, you know, that requires a full-time staff member to monitor those people and so forth. So we're not there yet with SWAP. We're still working on, you know, staffing and remodeling our jail and those kind of things. So, but progress is unbelievably wonderful with where we've come in the last few years. And so a lot of those programs, we have them. We just don't really have a person to facilitate. So that does make it kind of difficult sometimes. We do also have the ability to use the probation department for ankle monitoring, and that's pretty helpful too. And so you'll see more and more of those programs popping up, you know, as time goes on. But a lot of the programs that we're working on right now, which is super important, is the mental health programs, the GED programs, counseling programs, church, alcohol, drug abuse.
Okay.
Counseling and those kind of things in the jail. So,
But the work release program is not the same as SWAP because that's work release. You get to go to work, so you don't
Right.
lose your job and lose your income and lose your housing and all of those other things. And then you get to check yourself back in at night or whatever, depending on what your job is. And then on the weekends or your weekend when you have your days off. That's different than SWAP, is it not?
it is. There's several different categories.
Do we have that program here?
We do. We just don't use it right now.
Okay, so I was told when I called that it's been at least 10 years, and that person that I spoke to believed that it had been 15 or 20 years since we've utilized that.
Yeah, that's probably correct. You know, before my time, I don't think they were using it much. But it is something that I would like to see us have, and I think we will in the future. But right now, it's just so difficult with low staffing to have those programs.
Okay. It doesn't, my brain is just like, I get the SWAP program. You need officers there. But if the person is leaving and then just coming back in, it's just booking them back in. So you just have to search them again and put them back in.
Yeah, you can do that. The issue that happens is the coming and going. So you've got to monitor those people, and work release would be an agreement with the judge, and then they get to work and sleep at the jail, and each time that they leave, You've got to give them their proper clothing to go to work and make sure they're fed, and then they go to work, and when they return, it's full search, rebooking, all those kind of things. And what happens if you just have 2 floor deputies, feeding the inmates, taking care of their needs and so forth, and dealing with internal jail things, it's really hard to keep the drugs from coming in.
Gotcha.
And so that's one of the more difficult parts with these programs, is that you really have to monitor really closely when you take those kinds of projects on, because it's so simple for them to attempt to bring drugs in. And so it takes those extra steps each day, each evening or whenever that person comes in. It makes it pretty difficult.
So I'm going to put a pin in this and come back to it in a minute.
Sure.
If that's okay with you. You mentioned earlier when we were talking while I was setting up that you've gotten a couple of questions, and I have some questions regarding this too, and hearing things in the community. So do you personally believe that justice was served in the Hooper case?
What I would say is real simple. I follow the law, and that is all I follow. The Attorney General's office prosecuted that case. It was pled to a misdemeanor, one misdemeanor offense. I have nothing to do with the court system. Whether...
Do you believe that was a fair and just sentence?
That's not my place to even really say. It's what came out of the courts, and I deal with the law, and that's all I do.
Okay. So I was there when he was sentenced, and his defense attorney did ask if there was work release available. If there was work release available in Del Norte County, could he utilize that? And the judge's response was, I don't think it's here, but if it is, yes, you can. Mm-hmm. And then he was transferred to Humboldt County because we don't have that service here. And so when you look at the Humboldt County's booking into the jail, it says that he is on unsupervised work release. So he was just sent back to Del Norte County and never served any time in jail. When this whole process, the judge was just like, there will be jail time. What you did was so atrocious, there will be jail time, regardless of whether it was a felony or a misdemeanor. So why was he transferred to Humboldt County to have unsupervised work release? And then since we don't have that here to offer to people, are we going to do that for our neighbors?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because when a person is sentenced to do jail time, the judges send them to the sheriff, and those decisions are made by the sheriff of that facility. So
that's you.
If a person meets the criteria for a work program, or whatever the case may be, their release date and so forth, that's up to the sheriff of that county, whether it's Del Norte or Humboldt or whatever facility.
So you sent him to Humboldt County.
So I think the important part is that for full transparency, I sent him to Humboldt County without saying a word to them. Just simply, will you take this because this person is a county official, he's the assistant CAO, and I want this to be handled by a sheriff that has nothing to do nor doesn't know this person. And so that's why I transferred him there. But also, that's not uncommon for me to do. I just recently did that with an employee that was arrested for drunk driving, a sergeant from my jail, and I sent her to Humboldt County, and that's up to that sheriff to deal with. And that's the reason.
Did that sheriff put her on work release and send her back to Del Norte County to go to work and go home?
I'm not sure what the outcome was officially. My understanding is that she applied. So what happens is, let's say the Hooper situation, you have a document that says there's a misdemeanor conviction. So based on that, regardless of anyone's opinion of it should have been a felony or these kind of things, the sheriff doesn't make those decisions. You deal with what's in front of you, and what's in front of you is a misdemeanor violation. So if the Attorney General's office pled that down, regardless of my opinion of it, we operate off that document. So what I'm getting at is that person now with a misdemeanor offense probably qualifies for work release or these different categories of things, where if it was a felony violation, it could potentially be different. So depending on the application that the individual fills out, so Hooper, in that case, likely filled out a packet to see if he qualified for their programs and what programs. And then that's up to that sheriff or the appointed person that works for the sheriff to make that decision. And that's really why I sent him there, because I felt like it's important, just the same as the employee that I had, is sometimes if you're close to a person or you work with that person every day, for full transparency, let another official make that decision, and it works out pretty well. Now, that can be done anywhere in the state, so that's up to the sheriff of the county, because we're state of California, similar to a prison system. You can move inmates wherever you want to move them to, as long as an agreement is made. And so I think that's some of the questions, is why, what authority does a sheriff of Del Norte have to transfer someone to another county? And as long as it's within the state, then of course that's totally fine.
Okay. So we keep talking about transparency, and then there was, and you keep referring to the Attorney General prosecuted the case. The prosecutor for the case with Keith Morris, and he is a prosecutor for Del Norte County. So it was paid for by the Attorney General, but it wasn't somebody from the Attorney General's office from the state of California that came in. So that, if we want to be transparent, he is an employee of our local prosecutor's office. He ran for judge against Judge Olson and lost. There's the talk that he's going to run for prosecutor because Prosecutor Mix is leaving and won't be seeking re-election. So it kind of doesn't look. It looks shady. It just looks shady.
It would probably look different if someone came from Sacramento from the AG's office to prosecute the case, as opposed to, and my understanding is that the AG's office contracted with Mr. Morris to do that case.
Right, but that's, again, we're talking about transparency, avoiding the appearance of corruption or backroom deals and the whole thing. And by hiring somebody and contracting with somebody from our own local county to prosecute that case, completely nullified that. It's not a thing anymore. But so if we get back to the transparency and the things that it is that you're trying to do and bringing back those programs, how do you today, when we don't have work release, ensure that other people in our community receive the same level of consideration that Randy Hooper got, the advocacy, the opportunities for leniency, and the ability to go home and not serve the time in jail? Because it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that he's not driving back to Humboldt every night to check himself in and then driving back to Crescent City in the morning to go to work as the assistant CAO for Del Norte County, or spending his weekends.
Yeah, I don't actually know exactly what his program is in Humboldt County. That would be entirely up to the Humboldt County Sheriff to deal with that, and that's, regardless of my opinion of what he should, be doing, or how the program should be operated, that's a program that they offer. And, as long as he's following those guidelines, then that's what he's doing. And I think that what's important is that, anytime someone that has a capacity in a community, say a judge gets arrested for DUI, or different folks that might have influence in the county, then I likely would send that person to a different sheriff to handle, because I think it's important that the person is treated fairly and it's dealt with appropriately. So my opinion of it doesn't really matter. What matters is what's on paper and what the law says.
Right, but you just said earlier that it's up to the sheriff. You're the sheriff, so your opinion does matter. And you referenced the influence. I don't have influence in our county. So if I were standing in Randy's shoes, I had done the exact same thing that Randy Hooper had done. I would be spending my time in jail because I don't have influence, so you wouldn't send me to Humboldt County so that I could keep my job?
Well, potentially. It depends on the situation. It really does.
So if you have influence, you get to go home, and if you don't have influence, you lose your job and spend your time in jail. Because that's what I hear when you say that.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is the law is clear. Misdemeanor violation. And I think a lot of these conversations go back to, you know, the felony charges that he was charged with initially, where he spent quite a bit of, you know, almost 2 days in Delaware County Jail before he bailed himself out.
So that you're talking about the time of arrest on Saturday to when he was released on Sunday. It was less than 24 hours. So I understand that it covers 2 days, but it was less than 24 hours.
That's great, but everybody has the right to bail themselves out of jail.
Absolutely.
You know, I think that's another question that I had was, why was he released? And a lot of times, you know, that's important that there's an understanding that everyone has the right to bail.
Absolutely.
And those choices aren't up to the sheriff. If a person wants to bail, they can bail. But as far as the Hooper case, any of those influential situations where a person has, you know, the community's in an uproar, those kind of things, I think it's important to have fairness for that individual, fairness for everyone. Send them to a different county to serve that time. The other problem with Randy Hooper is that he is also a county official, and you know, the safety of that person in the jail might be something to consider also. So there's a lot of different variables, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. I'd stand by that all day long. But going back to it, the Attorney General oversaw that case that Keith Morris handled. I would assume that the Attorney General's office reviewed that case and approved that plea. And that's the way I feel about it.
Right, that's an assumption. And as somebody who likes to jump to conclusion on all those other things, we're making an assumption. We don't know if that's factual or not. In just the oddity of it, right, even then you're saying, again, that if you have influence in Del Norte County, you get to go to Humboldt County so that you can participate in the work release program. And he is on unsupervised, according to Humboldt County, he is on unsupervised work release. So he has no supervision, doesn't need to stay home. He's not ankle monitored when he gets home. He doesn't have to, after work, there's no house arrest involved. There's no anything. And I'm not trying to suggest, I like Randy. I don't know him personally, but he has always been very nice and kind at the Board of Supervisors meetings. So I'm not saying that he's a danger to any of us in that regard. But there's none of those things. And again, when you keep saying if you have influence, right, your safety at our local jail takes into consideration and you need to be moved out of the county. And then it just goes right back to the that I wouldn't get that treatment. Right? I'm not an official. I don't have influence in the community. So us regular people have to be treated one way, and the powers that be get treated another way. Do you see what?
I see where you're coming from, but I don't agree with you. I think that regardless of what facility that you go to, you're going to receive the same treatment.
But we don't have work release here because we don't have staffing for it. So I wouldn't receive the same treatment if I were sentenced in Del Norte County. Let's use Megan as an example, right? Megan works for her county in Josephine County. If she had done everything that Randy Hooper had done, absolutely, we just reverse it. We swap it over. Randy had to have 2 surgeries, and Randy lost his job for medical reasons. And Megan was the driver, and she fled, and she pled it down from a felony DUI hit and run to a misdemeanor. And she was sentenced to 90 days to serve the remaining 44 days. And she was taken to the Del Norte County Jail. Would you transfer her to Josephine County so that she could have work release so that she could go to work every day? Or would you keep her in the Del Norte County jail?
Yeah, it all comes down to the situation.
I gave you the situation. Would you, as our sheriff, because it's your decision, you said at the beginning.
Well, you're giving hypotheticals. You're switching it up, and what I'm saying is that I'm not going to get trapped into a scenario. What I'm saying is there's a misdemeanor offense, and I think that's the hang up with most people that I talk to, is that they feel like there should have been felony violations, and misdemeanor violations changes so much.
Absolutely. But I'm not giving you a hypothetical. I'm giving you the exact same situation, except for instead of it being Randy Hooper is the one, right? The one that's a county official that has the influence. It's the person who has no influence. If she were sentenced, all of the same thing, it was pled down to a misdemeanor. Randy had surgery and he's lost his job, right? If it was everything, just switch the people around. Megan Hooper shows up at your jail and you don't have work release, and the judge said if we do, she can get it. Are you going to transfer her to Humboldt County so that they can allow her to go home? Are you going to, so that she has the same opportunities? I mean, there's a fairness thing here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Like, where's the fairness for us little people?
Well, I think the bottom line is Randy Hooper is the county assistant CAO. What do you do with that person? So if I would have given him work release, just say I have that scenario, I have that ability here, there would still be finger pointing that I gave him work release and he's not serving time in jail. And the Humboldt County Sheriff would say, well, my program, he would be on work release or he'd be ankle monitored. So we can switch these scenarios all over the place and talk it till you're blue in the face. But as the sheriff, you make a decision based on your community that you think is best for the situation. And there's no favoritism or anything to be hidden or any of that. It's just as simple as a misdemeanor violation came out of court. I have nothing to do with the court process.
And I understand that, and I have never, through this entire conversation, have I ever said anything about your ability as an elected official to change the judge's ruling or what the defense attorney and the prosecutor, our local prosecutors, work out for a plea deal. That is not your responsibility. I don't think in any way, shape, or form that it is. I don't have an issue at all with how that played out. My questions through this whole process have always been, where is the fairness in, because of his position, that he gets work release and somebody like me or Megan would not, because it's not offered in Del Norte County. That's all I'm saying. Like, how do we bring that back? Do we need more staff? What is the solution there so that we actually have justice that's the same for everybody?
I think it's the same for anybody. I really do. I just, that scenario just doesn't make sense to me. If you have someone, we do that all the time. We send people to Humboldt County. We ankle monitor them. Lonnie Raymond from probation comes over and ankle monitors people, once a month, it seems like, to try to if they meet the criteria for those programs, then we'll do that. And it just depends on the program and what they qualify for. But it all falls back on what their crime is and what their conviction is.
So if they qualify for work release, so if I am convicted of a crime and the judge says, if there's work release in Del Norte County, go check yourself into the jail on this day, and I meet all of the criteria, I'm not a danger to the community and everything else, you're going to send me, whether supervised or unsupervised, on work release? Or do we not have staff for that? Because at the beginning, it sounded like we didn't have staff for that. So while we have the program, we don't utilize it. Are we bringing it back? Are we finding staffing? Or are we going to take all of the people who qualify for work release in Del Norte County, but we can't utilize it, to Humboldt County because they can?
Yeah, I like I said before, I mean, it's as simple as it depends on the situation and whether I would send that person to another county to be handled by that sheriff. If I think somebody's going to point a finger at me being lax or giving favoritism, and I'm setting myself up for that scenario, why not send him to a different sheriff so that sheriff can make that decision? That sheriff's not involved in it, and that sheriff's going to be completely transparent and do what is appropriate in the state of California.
Right. So I guess I find it a little bit frustrating here because it sounds like a David and Goliath story to me.
You should probably move on then, because it's real simple. You have a misdemeanor violation. You have Randy Hooper, who went to Humboldt County Sheriff's Office. He went through the same process that anybody would go through, just a different county because of the scenario. And if there's some issue with me not being transparent or not making the right decision, I'm sorry, but I think that was the right thing to do. I think that he should. That was handled by an outside judge. It was handled by the Attorney General's office.
A retired judge from Del Norte County. It wasn't like we brought a new judge in.
Okay. So, I mean,
and again, that's
how do you want me to respond to that?
That's not your responsibility.
Right.
I guess, right, it's just one of those things that, and I think that is where it feels icky to a lot of us here in Del Norte County, is if you have power and influence, you get treated one way. And if you don't, then you get treated a different way. And that's just icky.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I can understand, where people are coming from. And I think it's important to talk about that and be transparent. That you mentioned a retired judge from Del Norte County handled the case, and a local prosecutor handled the case for the Attorney General's office. And those are things that, you can go look at court minutes and sit in the courtroom if that's allowed. I believe it was in that case. But I didn't see anything mishandled other than, what I saw was a misdemeanor violation, and it's up to the sheriff to deal with the jail part, the sentencing part.
So it's up to you. I guess as somebody who lives here, who grew up here, I would like to see, because I've seen people go to jail, and even though they only got 90 days or 30 days or 60 days, they've lost their job. They had to move in with family, or the impact on them financially because of that. I would genuinely like to see whether it's transferring people to Humboldt County so that they can keep their jobs for work release, or bringing that program back so that those who qualify, everybody gets it. I get it. Randy gets it. Whether you have power and influence or you don't, that there's fairness there. I guess that's all I would like to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a fair assumption, that if someone local that gets convicted of DUI and they get, a month in jail, those are things to consider. We do quite a bit of that. If they qualify for ankle monitoring, then oftentimes we'll do that. It just depends on the conviction, the crime. But like I said, I think the important part is that a lot of the frustration here that people have is the misdemeanor plea deal that came out of that. And I'm not going to comment on whether I think that was appropriate or not. I think that
that's a good answer.
It's just not something. But what I have in front of me is the same as Sheriff Hansel had from Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, and that's what we react to, is what's given to us by the courts, and that I think that's what's important. But there's a lot of different. Looking back to the Randy Waltz situation, the perjury charge, my understanding is that I think he checked himself into a different jail also to be booked. But I'm not sure. A lot of those cases, a lot of those situations, depends on the individual, the community. As the sheriff, what's important is to show people of your community that you're not gonna take it on and give any favoritism. And I think that's really important and that's why I sent him to Humboldt County. And I know there's a lot of different thoughts on that from some people that, but I think it was the right thing to do. But I really, really think that conviction is what has people the most frustrated with. That seems to be where most of my conversations tend to go, is to that conviction and that crime and what took place. But really, that's not my area.
That is absolutely not your area. So that's why I wanted your opinion on it, but I don't. But I would like to see that the fairness applied equally to whether you have power and influence or you don't have power and influence, that your job at McDonald's is just as important as your job at the county being the assistant CAO. If the judge gives you a sentence where that's acceptable, then and you qualify for it, that we offer that, even if we need to transfer the person's case to another county so that can be utilized. I think there's a fairness there.
I agree. I mean, and that's a great thing to talk about, is what programs do you have in your local jail, and where we've come over the last 3 or 4 years from almost nothing to having a jail that's nearly full staff, and we're able to hold almost 100 inmates in there now instead of 42, and so things have improved dramatically, and they'll continue to improve. We'll continue to build programs and work with the inmates, and I'm real proud of that. I have no problem discussing that with people and talking about how much improvement has been made, and that's why I come to all these podcasts and answer difficult questions. Some people may not like them, but I like for people to understand where I'm coming from, that I'm a human, and I'm going to sit and talk with people, and sometimes I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit that. But the most important part is that we continue to talk, and these kind of conversations spark interest from other people in the community and get them more involved. And I think that's what's really important, is your elected officials, they should be talking to people. They should be on podcasts and out there. And I know that's very time consuming, and there's quite a few that do, but we've got a young generation coming up that needs to understand what's important, and I think we've got to lead the way.
Absolutely. And we've had many difficult conversations, not all of them recorded, but we've had those conversations, and I've always appreciated that about you. And when you were trying to get the budget changed for you with the sheriff's department 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, I stood with you then. I stand with you now in getting these programs up and running so that we can have that in our community. So if you need support with the Board of Supervisors to get them on board to utilize that, hire new staff, or to transfer people out, and I don't know how much that costs, but to do any of those things, whatever I can do to assist in that, so that we can have those programs here as well for everybody. Like you said, it is fairness, and you don't have an issue with it. So I appreciate that immensely. I know we were going to talk about the coroner's office, so can I invite you back so that we can talk about what the sheriff coroner does?
Absolutely. I think that'd be a great conversation, and it's a good piece to talk about, so that folks have maybe a better understanding of one of the hats that the sheriff of Delaware County does wear, and one of the many hats, actually. And it's an interesting topic, and brings to light some pretty interesting things from Delaware County. So I'd be happy to come back and talk to you about it, and I'm happy to come back and talk anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sheriff Scott. We'll see you again.
You bet.